Okay, so we have so far in our project, we have something like a bookmarks page. So if the user navigates to /bookmarks, we see hopefully some information on the page, a URL. Somewhere you might have a input field and a button where we can type text into like a URL and a button to create an HTTP request to send over some form data. We're making a post request and we do it to /bookmarks. We're thinking last week about how we can make sure our URLs that we use follow some kind of convention according to REST. So we're only using the resource name and allowing the HTTP verb to identify what kind of action we're going to be taking. So a post request creates a resource. And so we have a controller that handles that. And then sends us back the rendered page that our browser can then show us. What we need to do this morning is figure out what does the sort of user journey look like for adding a comments feature, being able to add a comment to a specific bookmark, for example. So let's, there's a few ways you can diagram this. We're all going to work off the same implementation where possible. But when you go off and do it by yourselves, always think about what the user journey is going to look like before you start work. So in this case, we could do something, a simple version of this is where rather than see the above, this is without comments, with the ability to add comments. I want to be able to still navigate to /bookmarks, but this time, imagine I've already created a bookmark. I have my usual input field and a button. I have a URL text, but I also want to have some kind of a button or link or something that takes me to a page where I can add a comment to that specific bookmark. So imagine I have two bookmarks. I want to make sure each one has something that I can click on to add a comment. Like add or something like that, add a comment, whatever you want to call it. In which case, when I click on one of these buttons, it takes me to the right page. So it's going to take me, if I click on, say, for example, this one, it makes a request and leads me to a new page. So I want this page to be /bookmarks because we're thinking about our RESTful routes. It's going to have a specific ID. So I'll just denote this with dynamic placeholder for now. And then it's going to be some kind of a page that shows me a form that I can add a comment to. So typically you'll see something like a comments resource and then new. This will show me that I'm on a page that's going to create a new comment for the specific bookmark. So here, all I'm going to have very simply is like the bookmarks, just going to be an input field and a like save button. So I can add some text in for my comment and click save. When I do that, it's going to go to a new page, which is back to /bookmarks. And this I should see with, depending on which, if I did it the first one, I'll go back to having my input field for the post. Let me make sure I can see all can see it. And save button, and then I'll have my bookmark with some kind of comment, and then another bookmark. That's what I'm going to end up with. And I might be a little bit more specific and say like, I want like a plus a timestamp, and say like, this comment was commented at whatever time. So these are what the user would see when they type in some text. They go back to bookmarks. They see some bookmarks maybe. They click on the add button to add a comment. They go to this page. They add some text. They click save, and they see that comment on /bookmarks. In terms of what our app needs to do, it needs to handle different kinds of requests. So for this first request, we need to handle like a GET request to fetch this new page. So we need to be able to get some kind of page. This comments new page, and then we're going to send it across to bookmarks. Then we're going to have to again handle a post request. And creating for a comment. So when we create this comment, we're going to send a post request to /bookmarks, and then get the ID. I'm running out of space here. I'm going to move this. Oh, that's just a stretch. Create a specific bookmark or create a comment for a specific bookmark. So we're going to have two IDs here. This URL here will identify when we post this request. We'll identify the comments, and that's not true because we don't have the ID just yet. We're just going to post it to comments like this. We'll identify the bookmark ID, and then we'll create a comment for that bookmark. So that's the kind of request we need to send over, a post request to this URL, and then we also need to make sure we have the form data. So it'll be something like, imagine that we want a comment that has like a text property, for example. So maybe you'd give it the text name, and so that will be the key. And then you could do something like, I don't know, fantastic. That'll be the kind of request that gets sent over when you submit this form. And so our controller will need to handle a request to this URL. And it will render back the original bookmarks page with the comment. So you'll have to update your bookmarks page to be able to show the comments. Now, this is all from the user journey point of view first. So we have to have this clear in our minds about how this is all going to work before we start writing code. So once we have the user journey sort of mapped out, we can then codify it in a test. So the next step after this would be to codify a test and write out the interactions that are happening here for adding a comment. So everything that you've done here, you can codify in a Cypress test, navigating to this page, clicking and typing into input fields, and then expecting or asserting things on the page. And the idea is we want to get to the point where we're asserting that we have that comment text on the page at /bookmarks. So there'll be a few things that we need to do. First of all, what I want you to do is clone this specific repository, and this one here. This is the one that I did last week, just demonstrating. So they're also start off with the same initial repository that just has the bookmarks. So you can see here that we have a bookmarks. Oh no, this is already with it. So what I wanted you to do is go through and we're going to check out a different version of this. We're going to go back to this version. So at this version, we can see that we just have the original bookmarks, the create, read, update, and destroy version of this. So everyone will start off at this point in time. What I want you to do when you set it up is to check out that version of it. So if you just run that, once you've cloned it and changed directory into it, just check out that point in time and then run through everything that you need to. So at this point in time, it's just got bookmarks, and then everyone can extend it, and we'll be able to look back at everyone's work. So as part of the normal setup, when you work on someone else's code, you have to make sure that you have created the databases locally, you've got the database schema up to speed, and then you can run it. So the first thing for everyone to do is make sure you can get the setup done. So check out that point in time, install the dependencies, create the database, and update the schema. And then see those tests passing. Once you're at that stage, go back and draw out what we've just done for the comment, feature. Have it clear in your head what you need to do. Then we're going to write out a test for the comment feature, which is codifying the sort of set of user interactions that you're taking here to sort of see that comment on the page. And then you're going to go through and start fixing those errors that your Cypress tells you that you can't see things and things you need to do. So start with updating your view, making sure you can click and interact with the page as needed. And then you'll eventually need to create a new controller for your comments. So rather than keep everything in the bookmarks controller, anything that interacts with or creates the resource for a comment, create a new controller for it. That will then lead you to creating generating a model for the comments table with a reference to the bookmark table. Then we have to update your schema, and then we have to make sure that we can have an available task to create a bookmark in our table, so we can assert that it's we can add a comment to it and we can see it. So we'll get to probably around sort of step 4, where I imagine I want everyone to get to, and then we're going to regroup and make sure we're on track, and then I'll talk about number 6 with everyone. So the idea behind this exercise this morning is to sort of essentially think about this association one-to-many in the context of designing a new feature, like a simple feature, but taking it with that perspective. What else would I want to say? If you get stuck, you can keep your version checked out to that point in time that I ask everyone to once you've cloned this repository. But you can always look back on GitHub to the current version where it has one implementation of doing comments. You can have a look at how it's structured here. So that's the task this morning, focusing on workshopping, adding a comments feature, going step by step. Thoughts and questions? Give me a thumbs up if it makes sense what we're about to start doing for the next 45 minutes to an hour. Well, we'll do a halfway point to make sure everyone's on track. Cool. Okay, any questions that you think you need answered to before we start work?
I posted a question about generating models to add a comment to the table through SQLize. I posted it in the Tech Help channel on Friday, and I don't think anybody answered. If somebody could have a look at it and just like let me know what me and Petra were doing wrong, so that we couldn't actually add a new column to the table via SQLize. I think that would be quite helpful.
Cool. Yeah, I will. We won't be adding a new column. We're going to be adding a new table. It's going to be a comments table, all right?
That makes sense. I missed the beginning of this demo. Thank you. Cool,
because this is going to be a one to this is a one-to-many relationship between one bookmark has many comments. Does that premise make sense?
Yep. Yes, it does.
Cool. So I'll have a look at the adding a column error as you mentioned. For this exercise, when you've got down to the point where you set up your view to have all the right things, you send the request to the right place, then you actually need to create records in the table. You'll get to step 4 here. That's when you have to create a comment table, making sure you add a reference to the bookmark table on the bookmark ID. So you can do it in 2 ways. You can create the comment table, then add another migration to add a column with the reference, or you can do it all in one go. You can have a look at, I can't even remember which way I did it. Yeah. Any other questions? Cool. Good questions, Jenna. Any other thoughts or questions you need answered before you start work?
As I'm still getting some errors with my when I'm trying to use SQLize CLI.
Cool. All right, let's jump on a chat after this then.
Okay.
Okay. I will split everyone up into pairs. There we are. Cool. Cool. Okay. So as always, we start off with the test, trying to codify our expected behavior. And as you can see in this test, I've written 2 kinds of tests, quite simple ones. And the first one is simply that we can navigate to our bookmarks page already with something in my database. So I go ahead before every task. I'm still resetting my database. Where the reset just truncates any table, any sort of dependent records in our table. So at the moment, the bookmark table is the main one, and any associated records it will still remove because the cascade option is set to true. Cascade simply means that any associated records are also deleted, so it doesn't leave it like empty fields in your table, which is not good. Or throw an error because it can't delete it because another record depends on it. So cascade true always when you have associated records and you want to make sure you delete the corresponding sort of tree. What else do we have here? I want to set up my table to have a bookmark so I can click on it. So this task here is one where it creates a comment with a bookmark. So you can create both at the same time. It doesn't really matter which way around you put it, so long as you set up the associations, which we'll have a look at later. So this is thinking ahead. I want to be able to create a comment and a bookmark and then interact with it on my page. And we'll have a look at the association sort of towards the end. This is also how I can control the timestamps. As always, when we're trying to create a test, If I don't create it ahead of time, especially when I want to, and I try and interact with it by clicking and doing it this way, using the interface to create my records in the table, I don't have control over the timestamps. I can't assert on them, right? Because it's an entirely separate application. So this is common. Well, in order to set up the state of your application, you need to create the records before each test. So not just truncating your tables, but also adding data each time that you need. So these two work in tandem. I clean the data, clean my tables first, and then set up the state, and then assert on it. So my assertion creates one comment and one bookmark with some hard-coded text and a date that it's hard-coded. So I assert that the comment appears on the page, and that specifically how each comment has a commented at timestamp. So I want the format to look something like that, for example. So after I've done my feature test, I then sort of move to the first part, which is making sure my view has things that it can click on. So I'll go to this page and add in the required elements. So in this case, it's making sure I have some kind of way to, on the main bookmark page, have a way to go to the add a comment section. So this can be anything that sends a GET request. I want to make sure it sends a GET request to this new page. So as a result, I need to go to my controller and have a way to respond to that kind of request. And so I've created a separate controller called the comments controller, and the comments controller is responsible for, as we said, receiving any request and giving back the view page for the comments. Now, I also need to have a look at my app.js. My app.js sort of requires my comment controller and loads it for use at this URL. As a result of my parent controller having the params, I need to my child controller. I need to make sure I merge them, merge params, so that my child controller has access to everything. So I can do a search for that specific bookmark that for the ID that comes across in the URL, find it, and then send that data back, because I need the bookmark ID. Because when I create the comment down here, I need to make sure I have the bookmark ID of the specific bookmark to associate it with. So I send this new page with the bookmark. The new page looks like this, very simple form. It's a post request to our RESTful root URL, bookmarks ID, and then the comments as a post request. Simple text box with a name of text and a submit button. This goes to my post request. So you go back to the controller, and the post request comes here. This is the comment.create. This create method is a sequelize method that allows me to send some keys, and it will create the SQL needed for an insert statement. Insert into a comment table with all these values. So specifically here is a comment table that needs a text and a bookmark ID field. So then we have to go to generating a new model for our comments. So when we generate a model, it comes up with some template for us to use where we can input into this the association. The association, I've added like a help instance method date to format the date properly. As always, I don't want to store the date in a formatted fashion. I want to store the date in a raw timestamp and then calculate it as I need to in the app layer. So I could test this and change this if I need to. So once I've sort of generated the model, I can add the association. So this is a belongs to relationship. Every comment has to belong to a bookmark, and equally, every bookmark has to have many comments. The way this is written here is to allow this property. I'm adding on, static is a keyword that you can use to decline class methods. So this is available at the bookmark level, not at the instance level. So note the difference between these two methods. I have a instance level method, date, and I have a class level method, associate. I need to worry about when I call associate. Associate happens by sequelize. It happens somewhere in this file. No, not index. That's the wrong index. This one. Down here is some code that sets up the associations. Here it requires all my models. So here it requires the model invokes the function to initialize them and then adds them to this database object. This database object is the main thing that this is exporting. So I add all my models into my database object, and then I go through and I associate anything that needs to be associated. So if there are any associations, it calls the associate method. This associate method is in each of my classes like this. I pass it the object that has all my models, so I can associate any model using this object. Okay, so when I generate a model, it generates this table. I've added my association here. Each bookmark has many comments. A comment belongs to a bookmark, and I've created a helper method here. My bookmark has many, the inverse relationship, has many, and belongs to. I've added a on delete cascade just to explicitly set for my bookmark, because I think by default it's not a cascade for on delete. So I've explicitly said if I do delete this record, any bookmark record, please delete the rest of the associated records. As a result of creating this table, I also created a migration. This migration doesn't have the bookmark ID column. There are two ways to add that column. One is by a separate migration, an add column to the comments, specifically the bookmark ID column. This is an explicit sort of migration that says, please add this column with a reference to the table. So this is what it's going to be called. This is the table I want to associate it with. And this is the primary key of the table. I want to associate this foreign key. So the references sets up the foreign key, primary key relationship. This says, again, for the comments table, I want a new column called bookmark ID, and I want to associate this column with the primary key of bookmarks and the primary key ID. So bookmark ID becomes the foreign key to the primary key of ID in bookmarks. That sets up the primary key, foreign key relationship. The other way to do it, if you don't want to add another migration and leave it sort of implicit, is all you need for sequelize is these relationships. And if you have that, then at some point you need to call somewhere here after you've created the connection, something like sequelize.sync. If you call this method, it looks through all your sequelize codes so far and sets up any relationships that need to be. It might even have to be after here. After you've gone through the associations. This generates any tables, any associations, anything that needs to that's currently not explicitly done. So you have two options, either keep it implicit and call sync, or just be explicit in any additional classes and associations that you need. Now, given that you've created these associations, you have access to helper methods. And you can access these associated records when you create them. You can do bookmark.comments. You can find all the associated records when you load them in your application. So the most important thing is this has many and that belongs to. That's has to be there for set up the association, making sure you think about the association the right way around. Is it a many-to-many? Is it a one-to-many? If so, which way around is it? Does a bookmark have many comments or comments have many bookmarks? Always use that language when thinking about relationships. Some model has many, or X has many Y, or Y has many X. Always belongs to and has many of your key things to think about. After we've generated the model and generated the migration, we have to then migrate our database. So in your command line, you would have to make sure you update your schema. So these tables are all set up. After that's done, you're pretty much done. When you create the comment, you can pass in the bookmark ID and just get the information out of the params and then the form submission. There you should have a passing set of tests for your comment feature. Okay, thoughts, questions from that walkthrough?
Yeah, that oh sorry, you go, Anthony, or whoever it was.
I've got a question to do with that third migration. Did you generate that using SQLize command line, or was that a file you created and wrote out?
You can generate like an empty migration and give it a name using the command line tool. Let's have a look.
Oh, were you meant to be seeing anything?
Nope. I'm getting better at pausing my screen share so I don't accidentally, although I did just flick to something that I probably shouldn't have. Anyway, having a look, migration here. So if you're not sure exactly what you need, you can just use migration generate to generate a migration. A migration is just an action you want to take to update your database schema. So in this case, it would be something like add bookmark ID or add column or whatever you want to call it. And then you have to manually add in this information yourself. So in this case, it was adding this information in, adding column, have column, and doing the rest of it, and making sure that you remember the down. Every up has a down.
Cool, thanks.
Adding columns should be fairly straightforward, and adding columns with references. So there should be a lot of documentation out there to how to add a foreign key reference. And there's also clearly one that is now on GitHub for this project. But yes, just generate migration. If it's not like a classic model, then you can just generate a migration for it. Good question. Other questions?
That model where you've included the associations, do I have to do that post command line, or can I do it from the command line?
Which one?
So in your bookmark model, the static associations.
This one?
Can I do that via, yeah, can I do that via the command line, or do I have to add it post creating the model?
And when you mean add it via the command line, how do you mean?
Like as another argument, so you have attributes which makes the columns in the table. Can I add the association via that as well?
Great question. So this doesn't add any information to the database.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Currently. It can do if you miss out, if you don't need to add this migration here, and you let Sequelize take care of it for you. Then this line, when you synchronize your tables, or when you synchronize your models, calling the sync method, it will look at the associations, and then if it hasn't already been created, it will try to add the column, so it will. So if you don't want to generate an additional migration, and sometimes it's a good idea to, or at least you can also create it originally in a table and have bookmark ID and set up the reference here in the initial table creation. It's always a good idea to be more explicit. If you rely simply on the fact that this relationship is set up, there's no necessary. The only downside is readability. When someone comes to it and reads through the history of your migrations, they want to see all the information there rather than hide it through Sequelize. Does that answer your question? I think I see a thumbs up. Okay, cool.
I had a question on that. So do we have to write it manually then? This has many or belongs to, so we write it all manually, the associate.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you have to think about the association that you want between your models and then write it out.
So if you had many associations, how do you keep that association model small? If you had like 20
if you
tables,
don't, no, this will end up becoming long.
is there no possible way to make it small?
If you have lots of models and association, like maybe bookmark is associated with lots of things, and typically for a user has many things. So you'll have like 10 or 12 or more lines here to associate that a user model with lots of other models. And the reason why this is stored on the property is so that I can include it down here. One of the reasons this is important, if we want to be able to seed or set up data in your database, you need to be able to include the association so that when you do this in one command using create and a bookmark, Sequelize knows what to do. So notice when I create the comment here, all these three columns exist, but this one doesn't. This is saying I'm going to create it with a bookmark, and I want Sequelize to associate it in my tables. So the only way Sequelize will know what to do is if you include an include key here and say what are the associations I want. And so I have to get at the association using comment.bookmark. This comes from how I've set it up here, comment.bookmark in this relationship. Cool. We've got 5 or 8 minutes for more questions before we break for lunch.
I've got a question. This might be for me to look up, but I noticed there's seeders as a file that comes with Sequelize command line tool, and you've got a seed. What's the difference between seed and seeders? Are they totally different things? They just sound similar.
They are different. The principle remains the same. You want to add data to a database. That's the idea of seeding. So set up initial state for whatever you need. And so to make that process easier, so if you want to just like quickly figure out or add some data to the database and play around with it, you can add a bunch of data using a seed and then run it, but also remove it when you need to. So the command line tool for Sequelize has the ability to generate seed files for you. They act a little bit like migrations, where you can add data and then undo it pretty quickly. Whereas for your test, rather than worry about interacting with your Sequelize connection, all you really need to do is add data to the table and then remove it. and we're already removing it. We're already truncating the table before each test. So all you need to now do is just add data. So you can create a bunch of fixed data. And so at some point, we might get to the point where rather than giving a generic function which creates a bunch of sort of hard-coded data, we could sort of modularize this and create functions to create specific comments and bookmarks as we need to, and then create in a test. So you might imagine that this function becomes like a create comment function, and I pass in this like the information as I need, and it sort of generates it for me. So I can have an ability to truncate my tables and then also add data as I need. Does that answer your question? What was your original question?
What the difference between the seed and the seeders were, but you kind of answered it. You kind of said that.
Cool. Well, you manipulate your seeders from Sequelize using the command line, and I don't want to do that during a test. I just want to be able to add data and move it. So rather than having to run some kind of system task from a test, it's much better just to run directly what you need. Other thoughts and questions? How are you feeling? And there's lots of other people who have yet to speak or contribute. Is there something that we're sort of like getting a handle on, understanding, making progress with? Some thumbs up, kind of more thumbs up or thumbs middle or thumbs down? Got middle, a couple surprise face from Miri. And Matt, what's blocking your progress at the moment?
I just struggle to fill the gaps between a couple of the pages, but I think it's just a time thing. I think there's nothing in to be helpful. Just there's nothing made. It's not like I'm stuck on one particular thing. It just filling that picture in my mind.
Cool. Okay. Marie, what's blocking your progress at the moment?
Yeah, like Matt, I think I just need to properly understand the responsibilities of like each of the folders and stuff. Just need to let it marinate.
Need to marinate. That's a good word. Yeah. Cool. Visualization can help to diagram it out and trace your way through the files and folders. That can sort of help orient yourself, zoom out and see it as a big picture. And ping me if you have any questions, right? What about you, Aidan? What's blocking your progress at the moment? I know you had a lot of setup to do with your new laptop this morning.
Yeah, I think I just need to just more practice with it really, and just make some commented code on it. So cool. Really understand what I'm doing. Cool.
Commented code is a really good, nice idea, just to force yourself to clarify what's going on. Okay, 12:30. Let's have a quick look for what's happening this lunchtime. That's my Cypress test.